Did Ohio State move in the latest AP poll after a dominant performance against Maryland? One big detail about Jim Knowles' defense, and Zed Key responds in a big way after being challenged by coaches. All that and more right here on Locked On Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Tuesday, February 8th in the year 2022, and today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. I would also like to thank every person out there for making the Locked On Buckeyes podcast their first listen or first watch of every single day. The Buckeyes looked good on Sunday. Really, really good on the CBS. Iron Eagle, Bill Raftery on the call. There was also a lot of other good basketball games, a lot of good basketball teams that were playing over the weekend as well. Not only the Buckeye performance, but when you factor in everything else that took place over the weekend, the question is in my mind, and it might be in yours as well. Did Ohio State or would Ohio State move in the AP poll after how they looked against Maryland? For the second week in a row, Ohio State does not move in the AP poll. They remain at the number 16 spot. They are not the only team right there in the middle of the AP poll in the teens. Also, right behind them at 17 is Michigan State. And then you have Wisconsin at 14, 13 Illinois. Keep going forward. Then you have Purdue at number 3. Ohio State is the second lowest ranked Big Ten team currently in the AP poll. The top of the poll, 10 through 1, goes like this. Number 10, Baylor, currently at 19-4. Texas Tech at number 9, not Texas. Number 8, Kansas. Number 7, Duke, who looks really good against North Carolina, but that was expected. Number 6, Houston. Number 5, Kentucky. Number 4, Arizona. Number 3, Purdue. Number 2, Gonzaga. Then the Auburn Tigers look really, really good right now. Ohio State's currently 14-5 on the season, 7-3 in the conference. And as we talked about yesterday on yesterday's show, even though I think they have peaked, I personally think this is exactly where the Buckeyes are going to fall and where they'll be the rest of the year. Yes, they could move up and back throughout this poll for quite a bit. I think they will move up slightly over the next few weeks, or in next week's poll that comes out on Monday afternoon around 12, because they do have a road game against Rutgers on Wednesday. I do believe that's a win. And then another road test on Saturday against Michigan. I believe that's also going to be a win. So when you factor those two things in, Rutgers being a tough place to play, Ron Harper Jr., studying like his daddy, is a player that is doing phenomenal things while he's on the basketball court. Then you add in Hunter Dickinson and what the Wolverines bring to the table, along with Juwan Howard, who is a phenomenal basketball coach. I think the Buckeyes win both of those games. Yes, it's Tuesday, but I'm making my picks early. I do think they will slide up after that. The one thing hindering Ohio State right now is simply they're not playing consistent basketball. Not saying they're not playing consistent basketball on the court. I mean, they're not on the court enough to be consistent enough to move up in the poll. If I were an AP poll voter and I had to look at Ohio State, how they play, the talent that they have on the team, and I have to look here and say, is Ohio State a top 15 team or a top 12 team or a top 10 team? And I look at who they played, how often they played, and everything else that goes into that being a part of their season, I'd have a really, really, really hard time saying a 14-5 Ohio State team who has looked really good. They've beaten teams they should beat. Okay, I would have a hard time putting them above Villanova, above Wisconsin. They split the games against Wisconsin. They haven't played Illinois yet. Illinois has played really good lately. UCLA, Providence, Baylor. I mean, all these teams, I would have a hard time putting Ohio State above them simply because they haven't played consistently on the court. They've had 5 games. I keep saying this on purpose, but this is a big part of their season. They have had 5 games that were not played when they were originally scheduled. As a voter, that's going to hinder how I view and how I can look at them and when I'm putting my ballot together. Think back to last football season. We all know how that fiasco went, where there was a couple games, stoppage of play. A few more games, stoppage of play. And if I were an AP voter, or even a college football playoff committee member voter, I would have a hard time voting anybody in that poll. Why? Because one, you have some teams playing 10 or 11 games in the regular season. You have some teams, I think the Big Ten had 8. I think the Pac-12 had less. It's very, very hard when teams are not playing the same amount of games and when they're stopping as frequently as they are. But the Buckeyes are good. Even though I think the Buckeyes have peaked, the Buckeyes are good. They're a good enough team to make the Sweet 16, maybe even the Elite 8, as long as the chips fall where they may and the cookie crumbles properly for them. I firmly believe, easily believe, this team can make it out of the first weekend of the tournament, first round, second round. I believe they can make it to the Sweet 16, even the Elite 8. Matchups are going to be a big thing. Zed Key's performance is going to be big. How E.J. Liddell responds when pressured, that's going to be big. Justin Arne's shot's going to be big. Michi Johnson's presence is going to be huge. Jamari Wheeler, the kid on the court that never runs out of energy, that's going to be big as well. I firmly think this basketball team, when hitting on all cylinders, E.J. Liddell said it earlier in the year, if they're hitting on all cylinders and they're playing like they know they can, I won't go as far as what he said. He said nobody in the country can beat them when they're playing their best brand of basketball. I think there's a few teams, maybe a handful, but there aren't many teams that can beat Ohio State when they're playing their best brand of basketball. Number 16 in the country, not bad. Not bad at all. The best thing is the basketball is handled in the poll can be moved up. You can move up the poll based off how you play on the basketball court. The basketball tournament, conference tournament, that's all decided on the court, not via a poll. In the NCAA tournament, that's all decided on the court, not via a poll, which is amazing because the Buckeyes are 16 now, but they could be one of the final 16 teams in the tournament if they play as well as they can. It's Super Week. Brought to you by Get Upside, and there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On Bengals and the Locked On Rams are in LA all week covering the big game. I would also like to remind you, or just a little reminder, that if you have a question that you would like featured on the podcast, we're going to be using listener questions throughout the rest of the week. I have plenty of things to talk about, but I want to hear from you and answer some questions you have about the football or even basketball team, primarily football right now. There's going to be a pinned comment on this video. Go down there on that pinned comment, leave your question there. I'll see it, take a screenshot on my phone. Then we'll answer your questions here on the podcast. And yes, I will give you credit when I read your question here on the podcast. Anytime you bring a new thing into a new city, a new program, you are going to be thinking about what's going to happen. Will I like what's here? Will I like this new shiny toy? Will I be able to have this toy last me 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years? Or is it something that's going to break after I play with it for the first 30 minutes? Jim Knowles is not a toy. He's a human being. But you get the kind of analogy and the connection that is going on between those two things. A kid on Christmas gets a new toy. I want to play with it. I like it. And then after 30 minutes of rough play, because you know how kids are when they first get something, it's broke. You brought me a weak toy. You got me something in this home that I don't like. Well, I don't think that Ohio State fans will have any problem liking what Jim Knowles brings to Ohio State. We went over an extensive look at the new defense that Ohio State has. Go back and check that out if you have not. I'll try to put that in its own playlist, kind of break those things down so you can exactly see what the new defense will have as a part of it. But Jim Knowles' new defense, there were some comments that came last week when Jim Knowles and the other new coaches and some of the new players at Ohio State, newcomers, spoke to the media for the very first time. And there's this one quote that comes from Jim Knowles that I think speaks volumes about one big detail that Jim Knowles wants his defense to have while it's on the field every single week. Quote, "We want to be able to create indecision for the offense. and particularly for the offensive coordinator. I think in college, offensive coordinators even have more hand on things that happen than in the NFL. So we want to be able to create multiple defenses out of simple looks and to be creative in a way that the players can understand. So we want to create 2 to 3 simple pictures that when you look at it or the offensive coordinator looks at it, he can't tell what's going to happen from that same picture. And that we have the ability to really do anything out of that same picture or that look, end quote. It's very similar to when during the season, you heard me numerous times talk about how Ryan Day is phenomenal at dictating what the opposing defense does. He's very good at creating and helping his quarterback understand what the defense is going to do pre-snap. And so post-snap, it's very easy for Stroud or even Njigba or Olave or Wilson, the O lineman, or anybody on the offense to be able to know what's going to happen before the snap of the ball and to know exactly how Ohio State's offense is going to respond based off of the things that are going on that they see before the snap of the ball. Now, think about that on defense as well. We talk about how primarily Jim Knowles' defense is going to have 3 defensive linemen. There's going to be a lot of slanting, a lot of stunting, a lot of looping between defensive ends and defensive tackles. There's going to be a heavier set, so you're probably going to see more heavier D linemen out there because those D linemen are really supposed to be cloggers and stoppers and making sure that they're stopping all linemen from getting to the second level to free up the linebackers to get all the tackles. Then you have the linebackers, two of them, two plus a hybrid linebacker, Leo, that are going to be 2 linebackers. The Mike and the Will are going to be doing the primarily same thing. But then you have the Leo, who once again is supposed to create more indecision, moving around either at linebacker depth or at D-line depth, creating a little odd look for the opposition. 2 corners, 3 safeties, a boundary safety, a nickel safety or a cover safety, which is more nickel corner to a lot of people out there. And then you have your free safety, which is controlling things. But if Jim Knowles wants to create 3 pictures that you could do so many different things out of that confuses the opposing offensive coordinator, you're going to have an offense on the field that dictates things based off their looks, their different sets, their different personnel groupings. You're going to have a defense out there that's going to do the same exact thing. Create different looks, maybe have different personnel groupings, maybe be able to have 2 to 3 pictures like Jim Knowles wants. And with that being part of it, it also allows Jim Knowles to be aggressive, as Tanner McAllister, the former safety at Oklahoma State who transferred to Ohio State. That's one thing he mentioned last week, that Ohio State, their defense is going to be aggressive. Well, if you're going to have 2 to 3 pictures that you're going to be showing an offensive coordinator, and the offensive coordinator might not have enough time to decipher or to depict what is depict what he's seeing, that's also going to allow you to be aggressive, because that's a passive aggressive way to say, hey, look, I got looks. You have no idea what's coming next. And then if you dial up the right blitz, or the Leo linebacker is doing things, either rushing or showing rush and then dropping back into coverage, there's so much going on that the opposing offense is going to be confused about. And then he talks about how he wants to dictate what the offense does, as well as create indecision. Those 3 things go into the one big detail that Jim Knowles wants to do. Have the 2-3 pictures that you see on the field, and if the offensive coordinator has no idea what's going to come next, this is stuff I love. I love watching basketball, and I'm a big basketball fan. And I get sometimes not confused, but annoyed with how simple some of the things that happen on the basketball courts are. Not so much the offensive plays, but a high pick and roll. Okay, you're running the same play every single time. And a defense, 9 times out of 10, NBA players, you should be able to figure out how to slow down. They can't say stop it, because a Chris Paul pick and roll is completely different than some other players that are on the basketball court running that same play. So pick and roll, and there's a lot of things in basketball that are more simple, more elementary, more things that are not hard. But then there are the Golden State Warriors. Then there are teams out there that are able to run not so much complex things, but things that have constant movement, things that allow players like a Steph Curry and a Klay Thompson and a Draymond Green, not in that category about how great of a player that he is, with the other two, but I do think Draymond Green's a vital piece to that Warriors offense. Where the Warriors, they're running so many different things at you. Now you may say, Jay, they're simple. Is it really simple? Because it's very hard when you have that much firepower on one team. Even the simplest of plays are hard. Jim Knowles is probably going to make this very simple early on for the Ohio State players and then slowly build up to the complex details of the defense. As he does that, once we get to September 3rd in the shoe against Notre Dame, we're going to see exactly what we want to see from Jim Knowles' defense. These three details: an aggressive defense, a defense that dictates what the offense does, a defense that creates indecision. All of that goes into this one detail: creating 2 to 3 pictures and not allowing the offensive coordinator to be able to depict what's on the field as quickly as he wants to, or even be able to depict it at all. I'm excited for this new look. I'm excited for the changes. And the more I look into it, the more I read, the more I hear from Jim Knowles and just watch things from Oklahoma State last year, I really, really think this is a right move, the right time. Well, time is a little bit different. I think this is the right move for Ohio State. And I firmly think there are teams out there, not just in the Big Ten, but let's talk about those teams in the Southeastern Conference that will not want to play Ohio State in the playoff. Why? Because they will not know what Jim Knowles is going to do, and they may play Jim Knowles' 14th game of the season. By that time, Jim Knowles is so creative and different. Those games at the end of the season, especially the playoff, they should be a lot of fun to watch. If you are somebody that would love to advertise here on this podcast, send me an email, jstevens317@gmail.com. That is my personal email address. If you're local in Columbus, I would love to hear from you, or just local in the state of Ohio, in that area, in that portion of the state. I would love to hear from you. I will get you connected with the right people at the Locked On Podcast Network so you guys can talk about all the details and see about you advertising your business here on this podcast. Zed Key is a player that I have grown to really enjoy watching play basketball. I've also seen Zed Key grow from year 1 last year to year number 2. I have seen Zed Key play very, very, very well against Duke earlier in the year. And then we've all seen Zed Key have a really, really odd, poor, abnormal performance against the Purdue Boilermakers. Of course, the Duke game was earlier in the year on November the 30th. That was a win that Ohio State had. He played 27 minutes. That is Zed Key, 20 points. He shot 53.3% from the field on 8 of 15 shooting. And he was really a difference maker in that entire game. Now, when you go to the Purdue game, Zed Key struggled. And this is where I think this challenge that came from Chris Holtmann after that game was well-timed. And I do believe that game alone by itself and his response against Maryland, that is more of the growth that we have seen from Zed Key. Zed Key against Purdue, one of the oddest performances that he's had all year, and is statistically his worst performance of the season. Did not shoot one field goal in the entire game. Not a 3, not a 2. He was 1 for 2 from the free throw line, 1 point in the entire game. He had 1 rebound. He had 1 turnover. But the big problem came with the 4 personal fouls that he had. Zach Edey, Travion Williams, and occasionally they were sprinkling Caleb First as well, who's a freshman, 6'10" forward. That's from Fort Wayne, Indiana. They would sprinkle him in every now and then. But Zach Edey was a handful, 7'4", 295. That's hard for a guy in Zed Key who is 6'8", 245, 250, depending on the day of the week that he's weighing in. It's really, really hard for him to do that. Zach Edey in that game did a phenomenal job of getting Zed Key in foul trouble. And then comes a challenge. Then comes a challenge by your head coach, and he's saying, we need you more consistent. Not just on the offensive end, but also on the defensive end. We need you, young man. We need you more consistent. And Zed Key responded in a big way. Now, it's bigger than what you're going to see in the stat sheet. We're going to go over some numbers here quickly, because a lot of it comes in his leadership, his growth, his response when challenged. Zed Key played 22 minutes on Sunday against Maryland, 6 of 7 shooting from the field, 85.7% shooting from the field, 2 of 4 from the foul line. He had 7 rebounds, 2 personal fouls, 0 turnovers in this game and 14 points. When you add in how Malachi Branham played in the game and then how E.J. Liddell continues to just be a 20-point machine, he averages 19.9 points a game right now, really, really close to just averaging a straight flat 20 points a game. I think Zed Key and how he responded was huge. You saw a more aggressive Zed Key. You also saw a very patient Zed Key. You saw a Zed Key that was waiting and trying to feel where the defense was and then attacking when needed. And I do believe those are signs of growth. Another big deal, another big issue with Zed Key, well, not issue right now, but an issue that I do believe last year was a big thing, and he has grown to work on this very thing, a part of his game. Zed Key has worked on his conditioning big. It's been huge. And it's been one thing that when you look at how he played last year versus how he played this year and how he's been able to bang with these big guys but still be able to keep his size and keep his mass and keep his muscle, Zed Key's conditioning has been improving in the offseason and has been improving all year long. I do believe Zed Key is a person on the Ohio State basketball team that Chris Holtmann knows he can trust. That I do believe Zed Key is a person that players like E.J. Liddell, Malachi Branham, Jamari Wheeler, when the times get tough, they know that Zed Key's mind is going to be in the right place, that he'll respond properly when challenged, and that his brothers that are on that team, they know, hey, Zed may get into foul trouble. Zed may have occasional issues at the free throw line. But one thing you know about Zed Key, he's going to respond. You challenge him, you push him, you want him to get better, you pinpoint specific areas that he needs to improve on. He's going to work on those very things very, very quickly. I like what we have seen from Zed Key, and the way he responds is big. I know in my life, I remember this is actually a bad eyesore in my life. Freshman year playing football. It was 0-0 playing Decatur Central. It's a road game. And this was one of the moments when I think the coaches realized there was a little different mindset with me on the field. Coach calls timeout. I have no idea what I was thinking at this time. Coach calls timeout, and I was tired. I mean, it was one of those weird games. I was tired, very, very tired in this game. And the coach kind of looked at me and said, "Hey, man, look, you gotta pick it up. I mean, you're not playing a bad game." But the kid is lining up off sides all the time. We know. We talked to the refs about it. I was playing center at the time. They had a guy at a 2-point, similar to the Leo. Guy lining up at a 2-point stance right there in the A gap, and he was offsides every single play. He was offsides, snap of the ball. He's already one step inside the gap, and the ref didn't do anything. Now, I didn't realize. I know about home cooking. You know about the refs on the road. I realize that refs are human, and they want to get off the field at times. But in this moment, I'm just going to be honest with you. In this moment, I was more concerned about complaining about the guy in the A gap than doing my job and finding a way to solve the problem and to allow us to win this game. I looked at the coach and I said, "Coach, he's in the A gap. I can't do anything." Coach just said, "Figure it out." I mean, he literally just said, "Figure it out." He knows I'm 15 years old. He knows I'm a youngster. He knows that I'm playing high school football at the freshman level, but he knows I can be pushed to do this very thing. He said, "Figure it out." In that moment in my head, I wanted to be like, "Coach Bender, what are you talking about?" He's in the A gap. He's been there the whole second half. He's realized that the refs aren't going to call it. I can't do anything. This is my mindset. Coach just said, "Figure it out." I think it's the same thing that Zed Key had that happened to Zed Key here in this moment. Coach Holtmann just said, "Figure it out." Now, eventually, we ended up figuring it out. We ended up winning that game 6-0. Or it was I think it was like 3rd or 4th and goal on the 4 or 5 yard line. We ran the ball in. I believe it was our fullback. We ran a fullback dive. Forget which play the way. It didn't really matter. Went to pay dirt. Went to the end zone. We scored. But that's the same way that it was for Chris Holtmann and Zed Key. Zed Key got challenged. He responded in the right way. Your boy did not, but Zed Key did. And Zed Key responded in the right way. He wasn't looking to have 30 points in this game. All he was looking to do was play within himself, play within the offense, do what the team needed him to do so they could win the game. Zed Key responds in a great way. It's all a lesson. This is a lesson we can learn from Zed Key about how to respond when challenged, either by a boss, by a coach, or somebody in our life. Guys, it's a fun Tuesday show. Still cold outside, but let's enjoy this podcast and everything else going on in sports right now. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Remember, there's a pinned comment on this video. What questions do you have about the Ohio State football or basketball team, primarily football? But if you have a basketball question, we'll filter that in as well the rest of the week. We're going to try to use your questions, your comments, your concerns as content to fill an entire segment here on the podcast. This is a Tuesday show of the Locked On Buckeyes podcast. I am Jay Stevens. We're out.